I recently heard a podcast that surfaced the most compelling, interesting, challenging question. Very simple. If you are a parent, how do you raise your children so that they want to spend time with you when they no longer have to? All ears, me too. How do you raise children who want to spend time with you and want to spend time with their siblings and want to spend time with their family of origin when they no longer have to? So that is to say, your kids, under our roof till 18, go off to college, they grow up, they grow out, and they could choose to never come back or to seldom come back. But is there some way that you could raise them so that they want to come back? We're home. And what is the secret sauce for that? Now, the podcast was a conversation with Andy Stanley, the fabulous pastor in Atlanta, and his wife, Sandra. And here on one foot is their Torah. If you want to raise kids so that they want to spend time with you when they no longer have to, then that has to be your North Star, and you got to be thinking about that at all the ups and downs that inevitably happen when we raise our kids. So they tell the following story. One day, their oldest child, Andrew Stanley, was a teenager, 16, 17 years old, very, very, very disrespectful to his mother in a public way. And it was obviously not okay. And it obviously called forth a response to teach him and to discipline him. But what exactly they should do was not so clear. They could come down on him like a ton of bricks, grounding him and fining him and adding lots of chores, but that was counterproductive to their ultimate relational goal. How could they let him know that it was not okay and still leave him wanting to spend time with the family when they no longer had to? And at first, they did not know the answer to that question, so they didn't do anything. They just waited. He knew a punishment was coming, they knew a punishment was coming, but they just had to noodle on it to figure out what's the move. And then one day, Andy Stanley had the move. He said, Andrew, here's what we're going to do. Your mother is going to pick out a very fine restaurant, and you are going to take your mother out for a date. You're going to drive her there. You're going to drive her home, and you are going to pay for this very fine dinner from your own money. And sometime over the course of that evening, you're going to find your way to apologize to your mother for your disrespect. Well, the plan worked like a charm. She picked a nice restaurant. He drove both ways. He paid. And over the course of the evening, his heart melted. Mom, I was such a jerk. I am so sorry. And her heart melted. Honey, I love you so much. Totally accepted. Just one of those things. Let it go. And they emerged from that dinner more strongly connected than ever. Roll the film forward. He's now married. He and his wife are the parents of a young child. And they don't have to spend time with the family of origin, but they choose to spend a lot of time with their family of origin. Now, this podcast stayed with me because obviously the question that it raises, how do you get people to want to spend time with you when they don't have to spend time with you, is not limited to parents and children. Isn't that the question of any synagogue, church, or mosque? Isn't that the question of Temple Emmanuel 365 days a year? How do we get people to want to come to shul when they don't have to come to shul? Isn't that the question of every employer in this post-pandemic age? How can an employer come up with a work context that is so beautiful and so uplifting and so energizing that employees want to spend time when they don't have to. They could be remote. They could hang out in their pajamas on a screen all day. But there's something that calls out to them. They got to shave, they got to shower, they got to get dressed, they got to put on their nice clothes, they got to put on their social face, they got to commute, they got to deal with people. And they want to do that because there's something so compelling in it. That's the issue that all of us have with our friends. Anytime we ever have an evening with friends, there's always an unspoken counter-narrative for our friends. They could ditch the evening with us and spend the night binging on Netflix, right? And so how is it that we can create a world where our friends want to spend time with us when they don't have to spend time with us? So I've been marinating on this. It's just such an evocative question, and wondering, is there some elegant unifying hypothesis that could apply to parents and children, to communities of faith and parishioners, to employers and to employees, to friends, to all human relationships? Is there some elegant unifying hypothesis that could unite and explain how we can inspire people to want to spend time when they don't have to spend time? And then I found my answer, and I found the inspiration, and I found the elegant unifying hypothesis in the most unusual of places. A book recently came out that is of double interest to my beloved wife, Shira. First of all, the author of the book is Peggy Ornstein, and Peggy grew up with Shira in Minneapolis. They went to the same schools together through high school. Peggy Ornstein was a member of my late father's synagogue, the Adath Jeshurun. They were in the same youth group. They've just known each other literally their whole lives. And Peggy is a writer of renown, has written a bunch of books. But more to the point, there's a second reason, which is this book is about knitting. And Shira is an avid knitter. There's never a day she is not knitting. And the name of this book is Unraveled, what I learned about life while shearing sheep, dyeing wool, and knitting the world's ugliest sweater. That's the title of the book. And the premise of the book is that Peggy Ornstein does not just go to Bloomingdale's or Neiman Marcus and buy a nice sweater. What she does is she actually goes and meets a sheep, like a real sheep, like a living being sheep, and she shears the sheep and she dyes the wool and she knits this into the world's ugliest sweater. And it might sound like this is a book that only a knitter could love. But then in the midst of this book is this really poignant vignette about parents and children. So there's a chapter called Carding, Carding. And carding wool means you take the wool. That's not the main point of this religious service today, but you take the wool and you have to get out of it the dirt and the earth and the grass and the clumps of matter so that it's amenable to knitting. And it's very time-consuming, and it's very painstaking, and it's very tedious. And Peggy Ornstein comes up with this move that she's going to call her father every day. She's in Oakland. He is in Minneapolis. He's 95. He has dementia. And he's in a facility, and this is in the heart of the pandemic, and he's completely isolated. So she writes that she has very different relationships with her mother and her father. So this is Peggy Ornstein's book. She writes about her mother. A profound loneliness pierced me when my mother died. No one else could be so invested in the minutiae of my life, so eager to hear about every trivial detail. No one else could provoke in me that volatile mix of irritation and adoration. It felt like a layer of protection from this callous world had been ripped away, like I would never be fully warm again. By contrast, Peggy Ornstein's relationship with her father was much more, shall we say, complicated. She writes, "Our relationship has not always been easy. He was a traditional guy who expected his daughter to stay close at home, marry a solid breadwinner like himself, in parentheses, Jewish lawyer or Jewish doctor, my choice, and raise children as my mom did. There's nothing wrong with that dream, but it wasn't mine." And she goes on to say that when she graduates college, she says to her dad, "Dad, I don't want to get married. I don't want to just stay home and raise kids, maybe one day, but not now. I want to go to New York. I want to be a writer. That's my dream." And he says, "Peggy, that's a pipe dream. That will never work." And what followed from that was a long period when she did not visit him. Long period. So when he critiqued her dream, that drove her away. And when he called her dream a pipe dream, that drove her away. But now he's 95, and he's in dementia, and he's in a nursing home, so she calls him every day, and all of a sudden, they have a deep connection. So for example, the father is a lifelong Minnesota Twins fan. And during the early days of the pandemic, the local TV show just showed reruns of home games where the Twins won. But because he had dementia, he was experiencing this for the first time, every time. It's like 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. And so she watches him watching Twins reruns, and he's glowing every time because they always win. And he doesn't realize the fix is in. And then one time, they have a dialogue about feelings, which they never did. She writes, "I'm so glad you're here, Peg. It brightens my day. I inhale deeply. I love you, Dad, I say. I love you more," he replies. Now, he never said that in his younger years, and when he said it, it really landed. And just at that moment, I realized this vignette contains the secret formula to how to inspire the people in our life, children and other people, to want to spend time with us when they don't have to, which is, it is all about just loving people who are in our life for who they are and being interested in them, whatever their interests are. And when he was critical, that drove her away. When he was interested and accepting of who she was, that brought her close to calling him every day. And that is the moral of her story. And of course, the pathos is that he's 95 and he has dementia. And when you read it, you wish, oh my gosh, I just wish for his own sake and her sake that he could have done that earlier in younger years. And that's the moral of our story. Don't wait to love people for who they are. Don't wait to accept the people in our lives on their terms. Don't wait to be interested in what they are interested in. Do it now while you still have time. Don't wait till you're 95. Now that's not only the moral of the Peggy Ornstein story, that is the moral of the book of Exodus, the second half. So the last 5 portions in Exodus, Teruma, Tetzaveh, Kitisa, Vayakal, Pakude, are about building this tabernacle, and Moses has the same problem that Andy Stanley and Sandra talk about and that every one of us has in our own way. How do you get Israelites to want to give to this tabernacle? Because it was funded in part by a tax, a half a shekel tax, but that wasn't enough. The Torah is clear that in order for this thing to get built, people had to choose to give what they didn't have to give, a teruma. And we know the end of the story. The end of the story is that they gave so generously. It was the first, last, and only time in the history of the Jewish people where a capital campaign was so successful that the people who brought it said, don't give anymore, you've given too much. And how did that happen? And the answer, if you read it, is very simple. Moses valued deeply what every Israelite had to give. So the people who were good with wood gave wood, and the people who were metal workers gave metal, and the jewelers gave jewelry, and the tapestry people gave tapestry, because everybody felt valued for who they are and for the gift that they could give. They gave so generously. And if Moses had said to the metal people, well, metal is a pipe dream, we want wood. Or if he had said to the wood people, wood is a pipe dream, we want metal, the tabernacle would not have been built. Now this sounds like common sense. But as our friend Gary Oren might say, it's common sense, but not always common practice. How often have we done with the best of intentions? How often have we done without meaning to hurt anybody? But we've done our own version of what Peggy Ornstein's dad did many years ago. We poured water on somebody else's dream. We said of somebody else's dream, don't do your dream, do my dream for you. We said, hey, not loving that dream. It's a pipe dream, it will never work. Have we ever done that? That's our growth opportunity. Because if we want people to want to be with us, it's actually a simple formula. Love them for who they are. So easy to say. The closer they are to you, sometimes harder to do. But that's what we got to do to knit together relationships that last. Shabbat Shalom.